ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hawk Carlisle, the President and CEO of NDIA, and welcome to what I think is going to be a great hour and a great session. Good afternoon here on the East Coast of the United States. I know not everybody's here. I know not everybody's here, but hopefully it's a good time of day and everybody's So it's great to have you here. I think this is going to be a great session. I think this is going to be a great session. Commanders Roundtable. My one huge regret is that I'm not sitting next to these four incredible gentlemen convention center where I wish I was. Hopefully, and by all accounts, I'm optimistic. Next year we will be there. So this is an opportunity to talk to the component commanders. We hear a lot. We have tons of industry and academia on the net. For everybody's edification, rapidly approaching 5,000 registrants, pretty impressive for a virtual event. I want to thank one more time my Special Operations Command partners and teammates. It's been incredible. They've been outstanding. Colonel Wisner and Noel, obviously Mr. Jim Smith, and General Rich Clark have really incredible to make this a great event. Everybody's truly enjoyed it. So my Special Operations brothers and sisters, thank you very much because it's been very good. So we have the four component commanders from around the globe, and you know, I think for all of us here, this is a time as we look at this, we get a lot of ideas, we get Billy Gaps, great speakers, but these four gentlemen are the ones that execute day in, they're responsible for making it happen, and we all know we have Special Operations forces throughout the world, 24/7, 365, doing the business of this nation. And these are the four gentlemen that make that happen. So this is a rare opportunity to get great insight into what they're thinking. And from the component commanders, let us know what we're doing right. Let us know what we can do better. From an industry perspective, we need to know where you're going, so we can stay up with you and get out in front of you and produce the training capability that your warfighters need day in and day out. So be candid. Tell us where you're headed. Tell us where you're headed, and let us know what we can do to help. For everybody out there, I hope everyone's family is doing well in this challenging time. For component commanders, I hope you and your families are all doing well as we go through this. Our plan for this event is I'll introduce the component commanders one at a time. I'll give them about 5 minutes to 7 minutes to make some comments, give us some insight, and then after that, I'll read the questions and direct them to the component commanders. So I think we already have some questions popping up. That's a good sign for later on. So again, going to be a great event. And let me say one more thing to my brothers here. Thank you for helping us do this. Thanks for participating in this. You gentlemen are all incredible warriors, incredible examples, brothers to follow. I'm honored to be on the screen with you. I'm honored to have served with you. I truly appreciate you giving us this time today. So we'll start with the commander of Army Special Operations Command, Lieutenant General Franz Citadel grad, deputy here at NDIA. Really happy about that. You are just a few years after him. He'll be glad to hear that. Little known fact is Franz actually started in military intelligence and transitioned early in his career. And has pretty much been a special operator ever since that transition fairly early on. You know, and I'll say this about all of them. There's not a position he hasn't held. He's been in the joint staff and commanded at every level. And as I'll say about all four of these gentlemen, every combat operation the United States has been engaged in since the late 80s. One or all four of these gentlemen have been part of that. That speaks volumes about the quality, the leadership we have in Special Operations Command. With that, Lieutenant General Fran Beaudette.
Thanks, sir, for that. First and foremost, my sincere thanks to General Carlisle and the entire NDIA for providing us this opportunity to link the exceptional efforts of American companies, especially America's small businesses and industry to the men and women United States Army Special Operations Command. Although we're in a different format this year, I think that our message is the same. Our ability to dominate space and outpace our adversary is mission critical to us. And to that end, we cannot win without our technological stars and industry partners out there. We feel that we are in this together. Our near peer competitors seizing opportunities, tested spaces. They're making significant investment in technology, and are aggressively employing it to erode our military superiority. Together, we must continually sharpen our competitive edge to stay ahead of our adversaries. We must keep the latest technology in the hands of our teams. We cannot expect success fighting yesterday's weapons. Our operators need technology that's intuitive and it's survivable. It must deliver the right information at the right time. Their decision making at the point of need. Human and machine teaming will result in cognitive enhancement, increased understanding of the environment. Equally important, that technology must be replaceable when it becomes irrelevant. This conference, we think, is about solving these problems together. Special operations forces were born from entrepreneurs and visionaries. That's who we are. We're innovators, just like 40 years ago. Some of the bravest people on the planet Operation Eagle Free American hostages from the middle of during a revolution. The mission ended in tragedy and cost the lives of courageous servicemen. But that mission led being here today, disrupted the system that existed at that time. It led to the formation of U.S. Special Operations Command. It set conditions to create incredible international, and it forged an irreplaceable partnership between industry and between us and y'all. This is a deadly serious business. On the leading edge of our nation's defense, to take calculated risks. We cannot be afraid to fail. And failure, we feel, is a requirement for innovation. Daring initiative is a part of our collective culture. We fight behind enemy lines. That's where we're surrounded and outnumbered, equipped with only what we can carry in many ways. To win, we need to be even faster. We need to be even faster and smarter. We need y'all to make us invisible. Enhance our senses. Help us see through walls. Across domains. And from every perspective. Extend our reach. Beyond the max of our weapon systems as we know them. Give us the tools to engage and destroy any physical threat. Or virtual. Blind our enemy. Deny them any advantage or safe. Develop communications platforms that work in the worst environments imaginable. Make our advantage insurmountable. Keep pushing the boundary. We need to think big. We need to take risks. We need to turn science fiction into science fact. Today. Like men and women are agile problem solvers and adaptive leaders. We are both towards action. It's where we need to be. Help us empower our ranks to solve problems in ways we have yet to even consider. Partnered with all of you, we have the ability transformational, even disruptive. Today, Today, we're working to counter unmanned aerial systems. As an example, drones, especially in denied environments, are a significant threat to our force. These secret revealing machines take away our ability to remain invisible. They are everywhere. If they see us, we lose our advantage. We attack them by focusing on the first principles, if you will, of the system. Once we target common characteristics of a drone, compare it with learning on the edge, operators can move through their decision cycle at machine speed. Together, are designing drones, find and kill enemies. This is just one of the many examples of private partnership to keep our operators safe, protect the liberties of our nation, and those of our allies. Together, we will integrate rapidly changing technology with game-changing concepts. We can capitalize on opportunities and generate new disruptive advantages. It's what we need to do. We will continue to press the limits of research and development through experimentation as we define our requirements in an ever-changing environment. We need to fail fast and we need to fail forward. We'll be right there beside you, shoulder to shoulder, where it matters most, to make sure we get it right and we get it in the hands of our operators on the objective. We look forward to reading the proposals being submitted to SOCOM, S&T, BAA as an example. This is a key process for us for helping us solve our most difficult problems in the future. I assure you, we read every one. Please send us what you've got. We need your help. The BAA is open until May 21st. Thank you for your relentless support of our Special Operations Forces. Our men and women are kitting up for the next set of challenges as we speak. And with your help, they'll be supported by the right technology, equipment, and capabilities we need to maintain our competitive advantage against any enemy today and well into the future. Thank you.
Hey, Fran, thank you very much. Great comments. Truly appreciate it. You highlighted some things that I think our industry members are very actively interested in being part of. We had a great speech earlier today, or actually yesterday, from Lisa Sanders in SOCOM S&T, and got some good insights. So thank you very much. Truly appreciate those comments. Our next opening speaker here for the introduction is the Commander of Air Force Special Operations Command. I think Jim and I have known each other for about 3 decades, so it's great to have him here and to sit with him as we go through this. He's an Auburn graduate, so I guess this is a point where everybody yells War Eagle, if you're a War Eagle fan. He is a career aviator. He's a helo pilot, predominantly in the MH-53, but he's got vast experience, as I said many times. He's commanded Squadron Group Wing. He has commanded, he's been in the AOR of inside Washington, D.C. He just came from being the vice commander of SOCOM inside the D.C. AOR, which is an interesting AOR in and of itself. He took over this past summer, took over Air Force Special Operations Command. And I'd tell you, the Air Force couldn't have picked a better guy to move into that position. So with that, Lieutenant General Jim Slife.
Hey, thanks very much, General Hostage. You mentioned that you were going to get to questions, and I just want to make sure I get mine kind of in the queue early on. I don't have access to the electronic thing that you're doing, so I'll just tell you right now that I keep asking Admiral Green how he keeps his hair so thick and lustrous. So if you can, maybe put that one in the queue, it'd probably do me some long-term good to hear about that. Hey, for our industry partners, thanks for being with us today. Thanks for giving us a little bit of your time. I know this is not an ideal venue, but it's one that we're glad to take advantage of. This is kind of the heart of special operations, is being able to adapt and innovate. And so as we, step off into this world of virtual SOFIX, the fact that, as General Carlisle said, we have 5,000 folks engaged here is really quite remarkable. So at AFSOC, I think what I would say is we acknowledge that we are at a strategic inflection point. And let me describe what I mean by a strategic inflection point. We clearly understand the national defense strategy. We understand the threats facing the United States. We understand the competitive environment we find ourselves in, and we acknowledge that that this strategic environment is going to require us to transform ourselves from the AFSOC that we needed into the AFSOC that we will need. The AFSOC that we needed is the one that we have today, and it's not the wrong one. It's just ill-suited for the demands of the future. The AFSOC that we needed has served us well over the last 2 decades, but as we look at the changing security environment, we couple that with, frankly, the reality that there will probably be declining fiscal resources available going forward. And so the real fundamental problem statement that we have to think our way through is how do we transform ourselves into the force that we will need to be in the future in order to address the changing security landscape while remaining decisively engaged in the counter-VEO fight that our nation, frankly, expects all of us to keep as an away game, if you will. And so how do we transform ourselves in that way? And so we went through some pretty rigorous analysis at AFSOC, and really the central theme of a document that we published in December. This document, the AFSOC Strategic Guidance, which really weaves together SOCOM's guidance, the Air Force's guidance against the backdrop of the NDS, and it kind of lays out our future for the next 10 to 15 years. We kept it unclassified in order that it might be available, frankly, to you and others that might be interested in how they can help us. The central theme of our strategic guidance is that our human capital is our competitive advantage. And so really we organize the main themes of our strategic guidance around this idea that our human capital is our competitive advantage. And so our first major line of effort going forward is how do we develop our human capital in order to make them successful in that future operating environment. And so as we talk about developing our human capital, this really has an experiential aspect, it has a training aspect, and it has an education aspect. And so some of the things that are most of interest to us right now are how do we transform our education and training enterprises in order to equip our most precious resource, our airmen in the Air Force Special Operations Command for the future. So that's our first line of effort. Our second line of effort is how do we organize ourselves in order to put those airmen of the future in a position to be successful. And so organize can mean a number of different things. I mean, it can mean wiring diagrams and organizational charts of who reports to whom. That's not actually what we're talking about. We're talking about how do we organize ourselves to take advantage of our human capital, to decentralize and empower leaders at increasingly lower levels of command echelons. How do we empower them? General Beaudette talked extensively about this in his comments. I won't repeat the things that he identified, but really we recognize that one of the things that we do better, frankly, than anybody else on the planet is, number one, we fight jointly, and number two, in SOF, we empower people at low echelons of leadership. And so because these are advantages that we possess, we've got to double down on them. And so that's really what our second line of effort is about. And then finally, our third line of effort is how do we equip our human capital with the concepts and technologies needed to fight and win. And so this is the one where, people immediately kind of think of hardware, in the Air Force. We oftentimes are hardware centric. But as we think about this, we're really thinking about hardware not for the sake of platforms and hardware, but how do we enable our operators to be most successful out executing the missions that the nation needs them to execute. And so this idea of equipping has to acknowledge the fiscal realities that I touched on early on, that there aren't going to be many major capital investment programs going forward. We have a relatively young fleet across AFSOC, and you know, I think really the only program that we're really looking to get off the ground is the one that is in the budget proposal on the Hill right now for FY21, which is our Armed Overwatch program. I won't go into great depth on that here. I expect there may be a question or two. I'll be happy to address those in the Q&A session. But by and large, we don't expect a lot of capital investment in new fleets of aircraft and that type of thing going forward. And so really what it is about to us is how do we modify what we have quickly in a way that enables our human capital to be successful in the future operating environment. So we've got some exciting ideas there. We're looking forward to partnering with industry on them. And I think I'll just leave it there. But thanks again, General Carlisle, for the opportunity to offer a few opening comments. Our way ahead is pretty clear. It's all laid out in the AFSOC strategic guidance. It's very complementary to what you'll hear from all the other component commanders. Great teammates and friends, each and every one of them. I'm proud to serve with them and happy to be with you here this morning. Thanks, General Carlisle.
Jim, thank you very much. Great comments. I will tell you some of the comments you made, just like Fran, you've already started to address some of the questions that are rolling in. I think the one thing we may have learned already is that next year in Tampa, we'll have to expand this session because there's an opportunity to get to some pretty good depth with some pretty good questions. So thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. Our next introduction will be for the commander of the Naval Special Warfare Command, Rear Admiral Collin Green. Great friend of mine, good man, Naval Academy graduate, go midshipman. He's a career SEAL, been doing this pretty much forever. He's Bud's Class 149. And Collin's one of those kind of guys that I'm pretty sure he's been to every continent in the world. There's not a corner of the globe that he hasn't been part of and done operations on. So it's great to have him here. And oh, by the way, I think we're hoping for a cameo appearance by his granddaughter. So we may get to that. But Collin, it's great to have you here. Ladies and gentlemen, Rear Admiral Green.
Hey, thanks, sir. You know, I didn't know where General Slife was going with that first comment because I've never got a hair comment. Usually it's a head comment, so hopefully you can see my head. Good, I made him laugh. But thanks, sir, for the introduction, and you know, hope you and yours are healthy. I'm at home, like General Carlisle said, and one of the benefits is I've had my granddaughter here, so I got to see her take her first steps yesterday. So it's good. Hopefully the connection will stay up because my kids are up and grabbing the internet. But I was thinking about Naval Special Warfare, and we've had to transform probably every 20 years. And certainly with the NDS 2 years ago, that was a time when we had to do it. And I was reflecting about partnerships. And I think as I reflect, we've adapted and transformed because of that partnership with established companies and small startups that are no less patriotic than us in uniform, that have really helped us solve hard problems as our nation has needed that. So over the last 2 years, there's been two things really for us to transform. One is called force optimization. My predecessor set that up. He had the vision to the sense of urgency to kind of transform. And really that's about how do we expand the competitive space with a sense of urgency from really headquarters to edge. So really what we reinvested with at Warcom is really wargaming, experimentation, and innovation. I think we had gotten a little bit complacent in the CT fight. So I think we really invested in that, and that has paid dividends. The second thing was really a vision. You know, everybody puts a vision out, but I really think it should serve to guide, inspire, and inform. And our Vision 2030, similar to what General Slife said, is what is the NSW our nation needs or expects in this transformational period. And that was really about 3 lines of effort: strengthen, compete, and reform. And the strengthen piece is really, you know, how do we sustain, recruit, retain problem solvers, creative problem solvers? And we'll really challenge our force to think about the X differently. It's been a physical X, and how do we look at things virtually or cognitively and kind of stimulate those creative juices for NDS. The compete piece was really not that we don't do CVO, because we do in maritime in naval special warfare, but what is our unique value proposition and what do we really need to focus on, which is maritime close access and placement. And then the reform piece was really about efficiency and optimization, and how do we leverage things like middle tier acquisition and OTA to work by, with, and through industry partners to get capability rapidly to the field. And it's really been a mindset. It's an iterative process where we divest, we realign, we innovate in order to transform. And really we're trying to permeate that within the force. And key to that will be our partnership with industry. So really with that transformation, we put a premium on what we can do that other people can't do, which is close access and placement in the maritime domain in denied and contested environments across the spectrum of conflict, from competition to conflict. And really, to General Sly's point, we've really looked at how do we enable the joint force? And first and foremost, we got to understand how they fight. So we put a lot of investment into understanding the Navy's distributed maritime operations, or the Marine Corps' EABO concept, and Loki. How do we understand what their key operational problems are, their key service problems, and then what does SOF bring to that competition space? So a lot of what we're doing is operations, actions, and investments in the competition phase that can create dilemmas, can win the war of influence, as the CG talked about, but also find, fix, characterize, and understand and set up the conventional force if and hopefully when we don't have to go to conflict. So really that strategy, we've had a resourcing strategy that it's really has 3 lines of effort that focuses on competitive advantage in the maritime. And that's signature reduction, lethality, and survivability of our maritime combatant craft, as well as sustainment. It's developing and expanding our undersea capability. Part of that edge piece is we just recently stood up recommissioned SEAL Delivery Vehicle Team 2 on the East Coast, and we're integrating a dry combat submersible capability that again will have great capability in GPC. And I think the other piece is to complement that resourcing strategy is what I'll call a campaign of learning. We're having to move towards the joint force, understand how they fight, conduct wargaming, exercises, innovation, and then place key naval special warfare guys in industry, academia, and with the Navy so that we can work together. So I would say thanks for the partnership so far with industry. A lot of those hard problems we're making progress on, specifically AI for ISR with the MAVEN project and how that has enhanced PED. I think AI for maneuver, where we've employed pretty rapidly a robotic autonomous system that we've used on the battlefield. And then just how we've levered MTA with small companies to improve navigation and propulsion and environmental protection for our combat swimmers. As we move forward, what I would ask industry, and we need to partner in this, is we need to be first movers towards each other with a sense of urgency. We welcome you as part of our wargaming and our innovation and our experimentation. I think the things that we need help on is battery technology. I think maritime precision engagement, again, to support our combatant crafts. I think AI for C2. Mr. Smith talked about the single pane of glass, the ability to collaborate and understand COP-SIP from the task force down to the tactical element. I think AI also for the business side of the military with financial, logistics, and maintenance, and then help us as we look to interoperate adaptively with the fleet, with their combatant craft, with their vessels there. So I'll end with, again, thanks for the partnership. I think sometimes we think of partnership more of a coalition partnership or a joint partnership, but I really believe as I reflect on, again, how we evolved and adapted to what our nation needs and expect. A key piece of that is the patriotic people in industry that are no less committed to our nation's defense than we are in uniform. So thank you.
Collin, thanks very much. Appreciate it. Great comments. I'm really glad you brought up the National Defense Strategy and great power competition. I think as everyone talks about transformation, one of the things that I think is key, and all four of you are keenly involved in this, is, the role over the last 2+ decades of special operations has been paramount. But I don't think that changes going forward with the new National Defense Strategy and great power competition. When you think about it, so much of things today and in the future include gray zone operations where the speed at which special ops can act is incredible and a key component of our ability to deal with that. And then what is often not well understood is that special operations forces are extremely low observable, stealthy as it were. So you provide speed with low observability. And obviously, I think our Special Operations Command is going to be paramount in the future. So great comments. Thank you very much. Truly appreciate it. So our next guest is a good friend of mine, Major General Dan Yu. He is the commander of Marine Forces Special Operations Command. He's an ASU graduate, go Sun Devils. I actually did my master's work at ASU. It's a good campus to go to. Pretty incredible scenery when you walk around that campus. It's a gorgeous place. He's been a career infantry officer. He's been in special operations. He's commanded at every level of special operations. And I think if you look at his experience right now and what he's doing and where he's been, if you look at Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations, Marine Corps concept, if you look at what the Commandant of the Marine Corps is looking to do as the Marine Corps transform, like everyone is transforming, you can see General Yu's fingerprints all over some of those concepts and what's going forward. So he's a visionary thinker, in my opinion, and we've heard that from him in the past, and it's great to have him with us. So with that, Major General Dan Yu.
Hey, thanks, General Carlisle. And I'd like to thank Jim Smith and his team at SOCOM for ensuring this happens. Just many of my counterparts. We've done multiple SOFICs, and it's always a highlight for us to get down to Tampa. This virtual environment we're here is certainly different. I think there's a place for this as we move forward, but the physical aspect of face-to-face with all the vendors out there is very important as we go forward. MARSOC, as most people know, it's the newest component in SOCOM. We pride ourselves of being continuously innovative as we move forward and a rapid adaptation of technology early, and most importantly, getting it down to the hands of our raiders on the tactical edge as quickly as possible. That's really our goal. Part of that is through reducing the physical, the cognitive, and the technical burden on them as we field them with these new capabilities that come out from our industry partners. And that's why I think SOFICUS is so important. It's this community of interest that want to take action in promising technology, enhanced capabilities for our forces that will always be forward deployed in a continual basis. When you think about it, what we look to do is we want to be fast followers in many cases. We don't have to have the solutions, but in other cases, we want to be first movers. And these forums help quite a bit with that as we move together with industry partners, our combat developers, and most importantly, the input from our warfighters. As you think about the NDS, and we talk about this constantly since General Mattis published it, about lethality. Lethality, I think, becomes synonymous with our soft forces out there, certainly in the physical domain. But it's really when you talk about the other things, enabling partners. And people think enabling partners, you're talking about the host nation that you're there working with. But really, it's about the whole of government and whole of international government, enabling other partners. Because when you talk about cooperation, competition, and conflict, I think soft, whether you're talking a violent extremism or you're talking great power competition, we want to be left. We want to be in the cooperation competition. And when you talk about the contact layer, we're there today, we'll be there tomorrow, and we'll continue to be there with our partners in there in the fight to ensure that we secure our national interests. So when we talk about enabling partners, it's the interagency piece that's just as important. And in some cases, we may never get to the conflict stage. And as you move on to enterprise reform, I think we all strive to do that, become flatter, more efficient without impacting the effectiveness downrange or whatever form that we may be in. What we've done here, as I talked about last year, we had a vision, 2030, MARSOF 2030. I think all of us are in the same challenge day to day, and industry is no different. In our lexicon, we would talk about force employment, providing the geographic combatant commands capabilities on a daily basis, challenge with force development, which is a 5-year time horizon. That's just how our system is set up with how the money is allocated. But in reality, force design is 10 years out. And that's why we picked 2030. And that may be too early in the time horizon as well, too. We may need to go further as we look at where we want to go. And our fourth pathways was obviously focused on the individual is most important, the cognitive radar. MARSOF is a connector, combined arms, and a connected arena, because we're talking about multi-domain operations, and a lot of this, what we talk about in the operations and information environment. And finally, enterprise agility. We look at enterprise agility, meaning our small size. We're able to maneuver and move and adapt as quickly as possible, because we don't believe we have the same bureaucracy as some of the larger organizations that we see within the DoD or federal government in general. So what we did over the last year, when I talked to you about the vision, we've implemented a strategy in order to fulfill that vision. We've also done some reorganization. We've taken our G5 and our G8, which traditionally are plans and resourcing. So we've taken our plans, our futures, and our concepts and merged them with our program developers and in combat developers, and made one organization so that we minimize any stovepipes as we move forward. We also looked at all the capabilities we have today and what we need tomorrow in order to get to that cognitive radar or the hyper-enabled operator in SOCOM lexicon as we move forward. We've also been partnering with non-traditional partners, which I think will be traditional partners in the future, when we talk about Cyber Command, some of the things within the Marine Corps and their initiatives with the Marine Corps information groups at the MEFs, in order to make sure that we have full spectrum capability as we go forward. As we look to continue to move forward, we have not only a top-down driven concept-based requirement system, but I talked to you about the RSIDS process, the Radar Combat Development Integration System, which is bottom-up, based on recent experience from our radars. But we also stood up what we call the Griffith Group. The Griffith Group is a federated group of hand-selected people tied to industry, academia, and other agencies outside of our formation here, in order to make sure that it's more than a red team, and it's more than a CAG. It's not a staff within the staff. It's a collaborative organization that continues to see what's out there that's promising technology in order to get it into the hands of our formations to test and validate prior to deploying as we move forward. So as we're doing this and we continue to look at where we want to go, some areas that we need the industry to help us is, as we work in the information environment on a day-to-day basis, and our reliance on data, but more importantly, the information and intelligence that comes from that data, being able to process that as quickly as possible from an all-source fused situational awareness. When we talk about all domains, regardless of across the military operations, being able to get that information from the point of collection to the intel professionals, and be able to assess the information, disseminate it, and get to decision makers in a timely manner will help that speed you talked about from objective to moving on. I mean, in the tactical terms, we use the terminology T2, F2, T2, EA, find, fix, track, target, analyze or attack and assess, rather, as we continue to go. I think in SOCOM terms, we really focus on F3 EAD, but we're looking at the all-source fuse situational awareness, but just as important, being able to take that information, and you got to have scalable, mobile, and secure over-the-horizon communications and GPS in the contested environment, and denied electromagnetic spectrum as we go forward. The other thing that we look at is signature management, full spectrum signature management. I think what we've seen now in the COVID environment, states have gone through additional screening, and that will make it much harder for us to stay in the shadows as we move around globally. We also are looking at autonomy-enabled ISR and strike capabilities, as well as trying to move forward on undetectable, lightweight, all-weather precision engagement capabilities. And just as important is the form factor of those capabilities that we can put in different platforms based on what we need to do, both from a direct and indirect, both kinetic and non-kinetic capabilities downrange. And lastly, as we talk about a more distributed battlefield, where you want to maintain your signature, is to be able to have logistics to you in near time, increase power, reduce size, and being able to do it at the time of resupply when you need it, instead of this continuous logistics push that we've seen in today's environment. Again, I think my partners have already highlighted some of the shortfalls we need collectively, some specific to a component, but I think this kind of forum will help us continue to move the ball forward as we look at the contested environment that we face today, and we'll see tomorrow. With that, I'll pause. Thanks a lot.
Dan, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Great comments. You know, I'm really glad you brought up logistics and that part of it. I think the rest of the Joint Force can learn a lot from Special Operations Command. If you look at expeditionary advanced base operations, distributed maritime operations, flexible basing, flex basing across the board, I think SOCOM and the components have demonstrated a speed and logistics at the point of need and time that is probably translatable to the Joint Force. Scaling it is something that we all have to get our arms around. So thanks. Great comments. I truly appreciate it. And from all of you, it was very enlightening. So we got about 20 minutes or so to go through a few questions. We have a lot of questions. So we'll kind of go through these and we'll give everybody that wants to make a comment a chance to answer. The first one is one that y'all kind of alluded to in a couple of different ways. So it may be fairly short in the answers, but it's incredibly important because it's what our industry is facing too, and that has to do with workforce and personnel. And the question says, can each of you talk about how you're innovating with your recruiting strategies, including targeting any certain demographics or special skills? Because workforce is a challenge, and clearly that's part of the transformation process. So we'll go opposite order now, if that's okay. So Dan, if you have any thoughts on that question.
Yeah, I think most people know from last year we talked about it. We don't recruit street to fleet or MARSOC. Everyone comes through the Marine Corps pipeline, and I think all the services in the environment we're in are having challenges right now. And it's not because there's people that aren't willing to serve voluntarily. It's about the throughput right now because of that. One of the things tied to our service where we get all our raiders post first deployment, they're looking to expand the capabilities on the front end, which means that we will have a better product on the back end. Just like in SOF, we have a higher GT requirement. The Marine Corps is looking to raise the GT requirement, which will shrink that aperture of available applicants out there. I mean, I think most people know, regardless what service you go to, of the target population from 18 to 25, we're looking at probably 25% or that are even eligible based on moral, mental, physical qualifications in order to get into the service. So we're working hand in glove with our service to see where we can get the right candidates to come through our pipeline to enhance our capability, and at the same time frame, reinvest them back into the service as we go forward. So I think one area that they're looking a lot for somebody that can work in the information environment, but that also has the physical capabilities to do what we want to do in the special operations community.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Collin, any additional comments?
Yes, sir. I think you talked about, I think all of what we're getting into the pipelines now are more digital natives. They're more savvy. So how do we harness what they've learned growing up to apply to the creativity of warfare moving forward. I would say that's one thing. I think the second thing for us is we're using our reserve force. We're targeting guys that are citizen soldiers in industry that want to serve in uniform. One guy that's really, really done a lot is a guy named Lieutenant Josh Edwards, who works for Google, who's over with General Donahue in Afghanistan, who brings a lot from industry to the battlefield at speed. So I think reserves is one area. And then a lot is what we get from the Navy, 60% of our force. So a lot of what we're doing right now in the understanding piece of the competition is SIGINTers, METOC guys that think differently and may be the supporting force through maritime access and placement to get the things that our nation needs in the GPC environment.
Thanks, Collin. Great comments. Jim, you mentioned it in your opening comments. Anything you'd add to the workforce and the recruiting strategies?
Hey, sir, the only thing I'd really add to the excellent comments of Dan and Collin are we're taking advantage of about 30 years of data that we've been able to collect on some portions of our force. And we're moving ourselves increasingly away from an assessment and selection program that's based on performance and more towards one based on attributes. So it's not really as much about how quickly you can, do a ruck march with a 30-pound ruck and how many pull-ups and push-ups you can do. It's really more about the attributes that you possess. And we've got a lot of data that we can go back and mine to find out what makes for the most successful special operators. And so really we're taking advantage of analytics, algorithms that we have available in the large data sets that we've collected over the years to help us be more refined in our recruiting, selection, and assessment programs.
Yeah, I think all the services are trying to do that. That's a great point, Jim. Thanks. Great comments. And Fran, any additional comments to your fellow component commanders?
Yeah, it's a great question. We spent a lot of time kind of reinvesting in the relationship with our service, from whom we get a lot of talent, if you will. And so whether it's their marketing efforts or initial entry training, make sure we've got some of our men and women at the key nodes out there where people are coming from. We've also leveraged AI-enabled recruiting a little bit more, and this challenge has helped us fight through that as well. So, we need to better understand what the recruiting requirements, experience, and predictive outcomes are out there. I think that Jim's great points on this. We've been able to identify those most likely to succeed, if you will, and break down our investment in, those kind of key populations. And then we want to be able to identify and mitigate any biases that we might have across demographics. We want to maximize and optimize diversity in our formations, if you will, and we want to ensure that, we're going for the best athlete anywhere and everywhere. We don't leave any talent out there that can really contribute to the formations. And so, we've got brevet promotion authorities now. We've got the ability to bring in highly qualified experts. And frankly, I think we need to think through additional and more temporal ways to interact with business and industry professionals really down in the depths of our formation, so we can have max connectivity out there. So we've got an initiative where we're creating a National Guard formation, if you will, that's much more flexible than heretofore MTO formation. So and the last thing I'll tell you is our formations have really pushed into social media and interactive spaces to carry the mail about what a day in the life whether it's being a ranger or in other parts of the formations here. What does that look like, if you will, on all the venues and vehicles that young people are on out there today? So we've been much more active and aggressive about messaging, if you will, about sharing who we are. We host more open houses now down in the formation, spend a day with an A team and get a sense of what that's all about. So I think all those things coming together have put us in a pretty advantageous position. But again, we want the best and brightest talent, whether it's off the block or coming from the Army to continue to add value in a most diverse way to who we are? It's a good question. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Fran. I appreciate that. That's a great point you bring up too, in this incredibly digitized world we live in, and us that have been around a lot longer versus the next 2 or 3 generations behind us, and how they use that and how that it plays in the formations of the future. So great point. The next one is a great question for our industry membership, because it'll give them some insight, and it's to each of you. If you had to pick one technology or capability that you don't have right now, but would like to have, what would it be? And I know one's not easy to pick. So we'll continue to mix up the order. So Jim Slife, if you have any comments on that.
Well, the one that comes immediately to mind is teleportation machines. That's something that I talk about quite a bit. Unfortunately, I think they're probably looking for something that's a little closer in than that. And I would say that this is going to sound a little ho-hum, but frankly, it is a vexing challenge for us across the board. And that is the technology that would allow us, frankly, to access and exploit the vast quantities of data that we all have available to ourselves. And so I think we're all moving kind of lurchingly towards an AI-enabled future that acknowledges the ubiquity of data, the power of data aggregation and advanced analytics. But we can see what that should look like out there in the future, but the specifics of how we actually get there is incredibly complex. And for folks of our generation that grew up, frankly, in a non-digital kind of world, I'm pretty convinced that we're part of the problem. And so what I could use help with is understanding what actions I and other senior leaders can be taking to remove the barriers to our force having access to the data that we already have in hand. I'll leave it there, sir.
Yeah, great comments, Jim. Thanks. I think you're right. I think our ability to, somebody asked me once to define situational awareness, and you go, well, it's everything you need to know when you need to know it, but nothing else. And then with analytics, data analytics, that's a question mark, right? You get too much information, it doesn't do you any good. You just need what you need when you need it. Great point. Appreciate that. Collin, any additional comments on that one?
Yes, sir. Thanks for the question. Hey, just for the record, Lieutenant Josh Edwards, he works for Amazon, not Google. But to the question, I think to kind of compliment General Slife, it's really the urgency or at speed with human machine teaming, I would say, across the warfighting functions, whether it's C2, maneuver, or ISR. I would say it's not so much about one particular thing, but it's how do we apply that across the warfighting functions. And then I would just say that the shooter is always going to be, we need a thinking, creative problem solver in the loop, but how do we enable him across those functions would probably be the critical need. Thanks.
Thanks, Collin. Appreciate it. Yeah, good points. Dan, anything you'd add to that question?
Well, I think kind of like what General Slife said about data transportation. I mean, to me, I think it really gets back to full spectrum management. I know there's capabilities right now where you have low observables and we're coming out with digital material and uniforms, but I think true full spectrum signature reduction. I think in the information environment that we're going to fight in, being able to stay in the shadows and having freedom of movement for our people on the ground or platforms in the air or whatever we're utilizing, if you're using cyber tools to be moved around there freely, to be able to have full spectrum signature management. I think that's an area that everybody's shooting around the target, but haven't developed where you have some kind of assurance that you're going to be able to do that piece.
Thanks, Dan. Great point. Fran, any additional comments on that one?
Hey, sir, I'm on Jim Slife's helicopter on this one, but I still have my parachute on. Let's be real, Jim. But what we're looking for is edge visualization undergirded by the computing that it takes to put the right information into the hands of our men and women at the right time. So, max opportunity to see what's going on in the battle space, be able to advantage themselves decision-wise with human-machine teaming, and frankly, stay several steps ahead of the changing enemy and/or environmental conditions out there. So, for us, if it doesn't work on objective, frankly, we're not sure we ought to be focused on it, because that's where it matters most. Our greatest innovation comes from being under relatively effective direct enemy fire. So that's what they're asking for, and that's what we're putting our back into now. Thank you.
So we haven't got a whole lot of time left. Thanks, Fran. That's a great comment. There's a lot of questions. I think we'll probably only get to one more fairly quickly. There's one that you basically touched on a little bit, but I'd just be interested if there's any one-liners you would add, and that is, can you offer your perspectives regarding the importance of reducing cognitive load of our operators via autonomous systems and supervised auto machine learning, counter UAS, augmented reality, things like that? Is there anything on the reducing that cognitive load and turning some stuff over to machine and AI versus what you're asking the operator to do? So Fran, we can start with you if you got any comments on that.
Hey, sir, absolutely. If there's anything we can do to speed things up, frankly, we're all about it. And so, the tipping and queuing initiatives that are out there on sensor management, I think, is one that's very important. And one of those things that, when combined with machines, it helps our men and women pick up or visualize while they're focused on the most direct threat, in their objective area. So I think that, over time, we've collected a tremendous amount of data. We've done it in, varying ways. And a lot of it is either unusable or it doesn't, cross communicate or cross level. And so whatever we're doing now, we've got to figure out how to scrape it all together and give only the most meaningful or useful aspects to our folks out there to enable their decision making. So instead of flooding the zone, we've got to be really explicit and specific. And I think the only way to do that is through, use of machines and support of advanced computing and sensors and the analytics that are out there that kind of help lighten your rucksack, if you will, cognitively on the objective. Thank you.
Thanks, Fran. Collin, anything to add to that one?
I would just say, I think the shooter, a smart, creative problem solver is going to be in the loop, but it's how do you use AI or machine learning to expedite the observe orient piece so that he can make a decision quickly in the ULOP cycle. Over.
Thanks. Dan, any additional comments on that one?
I think both General Beaudette and Admiral Green hit it. I think it's all about decision and timely, getting the information to the decision makers so they can act quickly, whether it's the raider at the tactical edge or it's General Milley sitting in the Pentagon advising the SecDef. I think we've got a lot of tools out there right now that are helping us make these decisions. I also think in the future, it's really not about this generation of right now. I think we're probably least comfortable about really relying on the full capabilities of technology that's out there right now. I think with the younger generation, that OODA loop we're talking about will self-correct itself to a large extent.
Thank you very much, Dan. And Jim, any last comments on this question?
Sure. Yeah, just real quickly, I go back to the, from my optic, the AFSOC strategic guidance. The central idea is that our human capital is our competitive advantage. And so, one of the implied pieces of that is we ought to have our human capital focused on the things that only human beings can do. And so if there are things, in the air or on the ground that could be done with automation or machine learning, then frankly, that reflects mismanagement on my part. If I've got our very most precious resource, our human capital, doing things that others could do, that means that I've got capital tied up in stuff that that keeps them from doing the things that only humans can do. So I guess absolutely, I'm interested in migrating as much as I can to an automated kind of environment. Over.
Jim, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize, and to our 4 component commanders. I know we'd love to keep this going. It's a great discussion. We have many more questions. I think what we've learned at NDIA is next year in Tampa, we're going to have to expand this session a little bit, or maybe have 2. I don't know. We'll figure something out. It was great to be with you. It was great to chat with you today. To our 4 component commanders, I don't think you hear it enough. We can't say it enough, but the American people owe you a debt of gratitude, and your families, for what you do in defense of this nation and the sacrifices you make. And we can't say thank you enough for everything you're doing. It was a great session. I truly appreciate it. Take care of yourselves and your family. And again, thank you for being part of this. Thank you very much.